Bagnigge Wells was one of London's many pleasure gardens that had sprung up from the early 19th century. Until the fashion for attending such gardens declined in the early 19th century, London was littered with them. From the more famous down at Vauxhall in the southwest, to Marylebone in the northwest, on the south bank at Pye Gardens, where the Tate Modern stands today, and its neighbour, the well-known Paris Gardens, where the southern entrance to Blackfriars Station sits. For over 100 years, these places of rest and entertainment were aplenty around town, especially during the Georgian period. The open spaces provided a welcome break from the ever-expanding urbanisation of London, especially for the burgeoning middle classes, and the population absolutely flocked to them. Around this time, another fashion for taking the waters grew, as wells were exhumed, most notably at Hampstead, from where the Fleet rises above ground, and used to flow in open air through Kentish Town, St Pancras, Clerkenwell, and down to the Thames at Blackfriars, where it empties into the river. Other wells were well known down south of the river in Streatham and Norwood, propelling these areas into well-off suburban parts of the expanding city. So the reason for Bagnigge Wells' growth was of course because of the River Fleet. This area of land is renowned for its waters, and conduits were aplenty further west between Queen Square and the east, where we have the old New Waterhead, which was a reservoir just behind Amwell Street, Islington. As the river winds its way down through St Pancras and then King's Cross Road, as it hit the old police station and court, it veered slightly to the west and then headed south again, thus creating a boundary between it and Black Mary's Hole, as this part of today's King's Cross Road was once called, and later changed to Bagnigge Wells Road for obvious reasons. It was here that two major houses were situated, George Toffey's house and Bagnigge House slightly to the south, and the gardens constructed to the west, up to the river's edge. In the mid-18th century it was discovered that the water in the well was drawn from mineral springs, and a couple of years later the gardens surrounding the house were redesigned and opened as a public spa in 1759. In the 1760s the gardens were expanded further and laid out again in a more formal manner. Originally fairly rustic, the extension here crossed the Fleet and extended further west. There was lush vegetation in the gardens, including plentiful hanging willow trees, bridges that crossed the river, which were 12 feet wide in places. Also around the garden stood a pump house, hedge-lined walkways, statues, fish ponds, fountains, a grotto and tea boxes. Although an underlying problem was always at hand, and that was the Fleet River itself. Prone to flooding, at times the garden could be under 4 feet of water. As is well known, the Fleet descended into nothing more than an open sewer, although this is not a sewer as we might know of it today, as it was actually illegal at this time to disperse household waste in the Fleet, but of course many flouted the law. Towards the end of the century, Bagnigge Wells became a less fashionable resort, partly due to the reputation of Bagnigge Wells Road, which had become a notorious hotspot for thieves and robbers. As London extended north rapidly, what had once been a rural retreat, Bagnigge Wells was by the early 19th century a place that was beginning to experience urbanisation. Streets and terrace houses now surrounded the gardens, and the area quickly became industrialised. Pearl Crescent was extended north from Bagnigge House, and a brewery opened next door. And Mr. Thomas Salter, the new lessee of the Wells, had taken on the resort in a period of considerable change, and in the same year that he took the resort, 1813, he was declared bankrupt, resulting in the sale of the property. The biggest consequence of the sale was the loss of the Western Gardens, for although the property was purchased and reopened, it was now reduced to its original proportions previous to the lease. Laws concerning public sewers were relaxed, and in 1815 it became legal to discharge household waste to public sewers, and soon after public annoyance reared its head. Further south, the council was starting to cover the Fleet, burying it deep underground. Land to the west of the river, which once formed part of the gardens, became occupied by the builder's yard of Thomas Cubitt. By 1831 the Fleet slowly disappeared from the public's eye, as a brick sewer was built the following year, and the area became increasingly built upon. That's it. Thank you very much for listening to my first episode on this YouTube channel. I hope to follow it up with lots more digging deep into London's real hidden secrets. Cheers for now. Ta-da.